We've got a leaky sink here, and to find out where the leak is coming from, by putting a hand under here, that's where the drip is, right at the bottom, usually at the lowest point. And so you have to trace up to see, is it wet around here? Is it wet around here? And go up to the source. A lot of times a leak might be with the supply side, but this time this pipe is coming right from the drain. So we're not going to have to shut off any water. It looks like this could be the culprit. It's a little wet around here. So we're going to fill the sink and see if we can watch it drip. It shouldn't take long, and we should be able to see some dripping down below if this is the culprit. So looking upward, you can see it dripping right from the seal. So even though the pipe down below was wet underneath, you have to look up to see where else it could be draining from, and this is it. So chances are we're going to need plumber's putty to solve this problem, and plumber's putty is just like it sounds. It's the consistency of putty, and we're going to smush it in there, you'll see. But you do want to keep it in a plastic bag just as an extra seal, first of all, and also because it can get a little messy on the outside. So in order to access what we need to access here on the metal strainer, we need to disconnect this first. Usually you can do this, it's finger tight, so we're going to be able to do this without a tool. And then we'll need some other more heavier duty things. Okay, so we'll remove this. Okay, all right, so with this swung out of the way, now we need to unscrew this, and this can be tough, especially if there's a lot of corrosion or rust. We're going to use these pliers to keep this from spinning as we're turning the other direction from down below. All right, oftentimes it's stuck so badly that that ring will break. All right, this is not the first time this has happened either. These pliers are bent because that ring is so twisted. So we're going to soak it with PB Blaster, and if that doesn't work, then we'll have to resort to using our Vibra tool. All right, the PB Blaster did not work. We have found that to be true more times than not, so we're going to use the vibrating tool. We're going to come in at as flat an angle as we can when we do this. You don't want to hit this thread, these threads here. So I think I can see the threads through there, and so we're going to go ahead and try to hit that and snap it off as is. So I'm going to hit it with a hammer and try to pry it off. Oh look, it's already loose. I don't even have to hit it with a hammer. So since it's already broken through where we ground away, I'm going to try to just lift and snap it off. That is a lot of crud in there. Yummy. This is really nasty looking, but so when we put this back on, we want to make sure that there is nothing in the threads like we see here. Okay, you can see how plumber's putty got all through the threads, and that's why it was so stuck on there. And now we can just pull it out. So now we'll just start to clean everything up. So we're going to clean all this up with the wire wheel. So with all this gunk wiped off, we'll clean out the grooves. All right, so this is a low power wire wheel, and of course you want to use a face mask. This is ideal for the job. You don't want a higher speed wire wheel. This is way overkill for this job. Okay, it's not ideal at all to reuse this after cutting it, but just in case we can't get another part today, we're gonna epoxy this back together, and it doesn't take a lot of pressure when it's tightened into place in order for the sink drain to work, but it does need to be able to thread back onto the grooves, so we're going to just do this as a backup plan. I'm going to mix up some epoxy. Okay, I've got it in this vise to help squeeze it together just a little, and we'll put this on. Okay, so we've got as much on there as we can with this round. Once that hardens, we'll put on one more layer. And we're mixing up some more for a second layer. And that first layer is hardened, so we're putting on another layer just for a little extra security. All right, we set this one on the heater so that the epoxy would cure a little faster. We'll be putting this on to test and see if it works. But we did also buy a new one, and they cost around maybe $3 to $5 brand new. Okay, this definitely spins on, and actually it fits really well. So it looks like that's going to make a real good test. Now we need to get this surface cleaned off, so we are ready to go. So to be sure we don't have the same corrosion problem next time, we're putting on anti-seize on the threads. So we're spraying these mating surfaces with rubbing alcohol. And we'll wipe everything down to be sure it's really clean. Now it's time for the plumber's putty. I've washed my hands very well so there's no grease on them. And we'll pull out enough to make a little snake, just as if you were working with Play-Doh. And we'll make a ring that will fit right here as a little custom gasket. You can buy the gaskets, but this plumber's putty allows you to do any size gasket that you need. All right, here's my snake. Now we're smashing this down and away from the threads because that was part of the problem last time. We'll be placing this in here now, and we're going to tighten it so that the putty is snugly in place, but as we tighten it, the metal is going to squeeze some of the putty out the sides. That's okay, but we want to be careful not to squeeze so tight that all the putty squeezes out, because if this metal surface touches the metal surface underneath, that means there's not enough putty in there to seal it. Yeah, I'm going to put this nut back on now. We're cutting off this putty to make sure it doesn't get in the threads. We're spinning this nut up all the way now and making sure the basket does not spin. So again, holding this to make sure we're not letting the basket spin. We're turning this as snugly as we can. We may put a wrench on it later, but again, we don't want that. We don't want metal against metal. So we're just getting it as snugly as we can. All right, you have tightened this pretty snugly, and you can see a little more squeezed out. So you can just trim this with a knife. This should not move or wiggle at all. If it moves around or wiggles, it's just going to leak again. All right, it's time to swing this P-trap back into place. Okay, so we're spinning this up hand tight. You will not need to use a wrench really, except maybe a tiny bit at the end, but if you tighten this too tight, you're just going to crack it. It is plastic after all, so just tighten it snugly. It does need to be snug, but not too snug or it'll break. So this is snugged up very well, and I'm just checking all these other joints to be sure that if we need to snug them up, we can. All right, now we're ready to turn on the water and check for leaks. Okay, I don't see any leaks, but we'll do a few more tests just to be sure. All right, we have dried the floor of the cupboard here very well, and we're going to leave a little bit of toilet paper there. If there is even one drop, we'll know it. All right, now we're going to do a pressure test, so we'll put a lot of water in here, let it build up, and then we'll release it so it can all go down at once. All right, that should be enough to build up some pressure, and now we're going to check below to make sure nothing is coming through that new seal we just put on. Everything is dry to the touch up here, and everything is dry down below. Nothing has leaked out down to the bottom. So now we're going to unplug the sink so all that water is going to flush down all at once. You can hear the water going through. I'm not seeing any water building up out of the seams. All right, so everything checked out good and dry, but we will leave the toilet paper there and then we'll check it again tomorrow or maybe later tonight. But if it hasn't leaked by now, it's probably not going to. Leaving this here a little longer just gives a little extra security just in case. And we were going to use this ring that we just bought and simply do a test with the one we repaired, but as it turns out, this one we repaired is doing the job. So who knows, we'll either return this or maybe we'll just save it for the next time we have a repair like this come up.